Hello and welcome back everyone, we Online, and today I'm gonna continue the series What If Naruto Became Madara's Girlfriend Part 4. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Konohagakure no Sado, Country of Fire. Three heads were huddled together around a set of seals drawn in ink on the floor of a cave in Fire Country. A lot of lit candles were all around them, casting shadows on the walls of the cave. "Are you sure this will work, Shikamaru?" Haruno Sakura asked for what seemed like the umpteenth time that night, as the only brunette of the three was busy checking and rechecking the many complicated-looking seals drawn with ink on the ground. Dara Shikamaru was on his hands and knees at a seal, holding a brush in one hand and a notebook in the other. He almost groaned. The lazy genius finally looked up from his work and half glared at the pink-haired Kunoichi while Hyuga Neji tried to hide a grin behind Sakura. "Troublesome," Shikamaru muttered before giving his old friend's teammate a half-glare, half-frustrated look. "Like I've been saying for the past 3 months or so, I'm only going by Seo's sealing notes for this." Seo is Konoha's only living seal expert now that Jiraiya-sama is dead, having mastered seals at the young age of 15. "I studied seals with her under Jiraiya-sama, and I know her skill level in sealing. I'm not as skilled as her, but I'm still competent enough." "Well, those are Seo's notes," Neji said after a long pause. "There is a good chance that it will work, but the question is whether or not it will help us find Seo." "We have to," insisted Sakura, trembling at the bottom of her lip. "I can't lose her too. I already lost Sasuke. I can't lose my last remaining teammate. We have to find her." "Of course, I want to find Seo too, Sakura," Neji said with a calm voice. "But once we find her, what's next?" "You heard what Tsunade-sama said all those months ago when Seo collapsed the whole council meeting room on Danzo and those two elders. She has some unknown doujutsu. Then there's the photo you found. She might not be the same Seo you knew once we find her." "We'll worry about it when we find her," insisted Sakura, and before Neji could say anything, Shikamaru's shout got their attention. "Okay, we're all set here," said the usual lazy genius as he tucked the brush behind his ear and scanned his eyes over the notebook in his hand, which had all of Seo's sealing notes. "I triple-checked every single seal I drew here, and I did my best to follow Seo's sealing notes, so I think we're good to go." Shikamaru didn't sound too sure of himself for a second, and Neji was afraid for his life for a second. He knew, just like the other two with him, that seals can be very tricky and dangerous if they aren't done right. If a seal is made wrong, it can turn the person who is using it inside out. Because of this, most ninjas never learn more about seals than the basic item sealing that all ninjas above the rank of Chunin learn. That's why there are so few seal masters in the world. Jiraiya of the Sannin is one of the most famous. Before he died, he taught everything he knew to his last student, Namikaze Seo. When her teacher died, Namikaze Seo became Konoha's only living expert. "Well, then, let's take a chance," Sakura said with a sigh, having heard the same lack of confidence in Shikamaru's voice. Shikamaru nodded. "Okay, get in the middle of that big sealing circle," he said, pointing to the biggest sealing circle in the middle of the cave. It was in the shape of a 6-pointed star and had several seal writings and kanji words on it. Sakura and Neji did this before watching Shikamaru get into the sealing circle. The lazy genius then put the notebook between his lips and made a series of strange hand seals slowly, almost as if he wasn't used to it, before clapping both hands together loudly. Shikamaru said this through the notebook he was holding in his mouth: "Forbidden art, time travel." The three of them then left the cave in a bright flash of light. Ikaraku Ramen. Konohagakure no Sado. Headache Sakumo slowly ate his bowl of ramen at the Ikaraku stand, not caring that the owner of the stand and his girlfriend were trying to see his face but couldn't. He and his team just got back to the village an hour ago. He also gave the Hokage a report on the mission, but he left out the fact that Seo girl had helped his team. The White Fang then looked in his pocket at the scroll. During one of the breaks he and his team took on the way back to the village, Sakumo tried out the summoning scroll that Seo had given him. Then Sakumo realized that she wasn't kidding when she said that her summon wolves were kind of picky about who could call them. To make a long story short, Sakumo didn't pass their test, but the wolf that tested him, Tsuki or something, was kind enough to give him the wolf contract of one of their cousins. These cousins are just regular wolf summons, but they are pretty strong on their own. "Sakumo," came a loud, boisterous voice, and Sakumo looked up to see Jiraiya of the Sannin sitting next to him and ordering a cup of tea from the owner of the ramen stand. "I'm glad to see you're okay." Sakumo nodded to Jiraiya and said, "Jiraiya, He was surprised to see the spymaster in the village that day, since Jiraiya was often out of the village during the Third Great Shinobi War to gather information and intelligence on their enemies for the village. Orochimaru and Danzo told me about your mission, Jiraiya said as he put a cup of tea in front of Sakumo, who nodded. Orochimaru told me that Sarutobi-sensei was burning incense to the gods to thank them for listening to Danzo's advice to have a medic ninja with your squad or we'd see your whole squad come back in body bags. But I think Orochi is always exaggerating. Sakumo's mouth moved up into a smile. He knew that Orochimaru and Jiraiya had been best friends since they were young kids in the academy, and have been working together as genin ever since. Even though the young man is 5 years younger than Sakumo, they had a good rivalry and got along like brothers. This was similar to what he had with Namikaze Minato. Oh, yeah, Jiraiya, said Sakumo as he looked at Jiraiya, who was gently blowing on his tea to cool it down. Do you know someone whose name is Seo? Jiraiya looked at Sakumo with an eyebrow raised. Excuse me, he asked, confused, as he brought the cup up to his lips. It wasn't in the report I gave Hokage-sama, but my team ran into some trouble on our mission. A girl helped us out of the blue, but in exchange, she told us not to tell Hokage-sama or the village about her, Sakumo said. Jiraiya nodded, but he still had a quizzical look on his face. Before Seo left, she said something. She said, and I quote, "When you see Jiraiya, tell him one thing. Tell him that Seo-sensei sends her regards." As soon as Sakumo said Seo-sensei, Jiraiya choked on his tea. He coughed and hacked at his chest to get the tea to go down the right way. Finally, the Sannin turned to look at Sakumo. Their eyes were as big as fish's eyes, and they showed shock and disbelief. Jiraiya almost said, Seo-sensei. This caught Sakumo off guard. Yeah, Sakumo said uneasily. What's the matter? Jiraiya didn't answer for a while, and his face showed that he was still shocked. The Toad Sannin finally found his voice. Did this Seo have red hair? Did her eyes look like the sky? Is she a seal mistress? Does she call wolves? And are those wolves silver wolves? Jiraiya almost tripped over his own words because he was talking so fast. Yeah. When Sakumo said that, Jiraiya's eyes got bigger. He said, it can't be. Sensei. Jiraiya, do you know her? Sakumo asked in a confused tone. Who's she? Sakumo, if it's the same Seo I knew, you should know about her too, Jiraiya said with seriousness. The legendary Kunoichi who made seal teaching what it is today, as well as the founder of the ANBU Corps in Konoha, and the creator of the current ninja training system that almost every village in the world uses today, as well as the creator of Konoha's security system that no shinobi has ever been able to break through, Jiraiya told Sakumo. The legendary Kunoichi Uchiha Seo. Before Sakumo could answer, some ANBU showed up behind them. The two shinobi turned to face the ANBU messenger. I'm sorry, but there's trouble in the Senju forest south of Konoha. Nidaime-sama isn't available right now, and Sandaime Hokage-sama is in a meeting with the War Council, so Hokage-sama asked Jiraiya-sama and Hadake-senpai to find out what's going on. Jiraiya frowned before nodding. Understood. Tsukigakure no Sato, Moon County. The wind was very strong in the village of Tsukigakure, and many leaves were blowing around. Seo Uchiha had just traveled through a portal from the Earth Country to the Moon Country. She was looking at the village from the roof of the house of the Tsukikage, which has the second highest roof after the Tsukikage Tower. When they first started building the village, Madara insisted that he didn't need a tower, and that he could work from his own house. However, the people wouldn't listen to him, and since the majority rules, they built the tower anyway. As a result, the Tsukikage Tower was built in one of the most central places in the village. Outposts were set up at each entrance of the village to keep an eye out for enemies, but they don't really need them because no one can get to Tsukigakure unless they're a shinobi or it's the night of the new moon, which is the only time the village can be seen from Moon Country. Seo wrapped her arms around herself, but she doesn't know if it's because of the cold wind or because she feels cold. She narrowed her eyes as she looked in the direction of Fire Country. Since she and Madara left Konoha about 30 years ago, they haven't heard from or talked to anyone there. Her mission to Earth Country to learn more about the situation surrounding the current war was the first time she heard about Konoha again in about 30 years. And it reminds her of bad times, like the night Senju Hashirama touched her inappropriately. Even though it had been about 30 years, Seo still can't forget it. And to make things worse, she had a photographic memory, which is how she could remember every seal she had ever seen or studied and draw them without looking at her notes. Seo thought for a moment about Haru, Danzo, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tobirama as she talked about Konoha. She also wondered how they are doing and if they are okay. Seo shivered as a sudden cold wind blew past her, and she turned to go back inside her warm house. Madara wasn't back yet. He was probably still working hard in the Tsukikage Tower. In Tsukigakure, one difference is that the Tsukikage only takes care of the important things. The smaller decisions were made by the Moon Council, which is made up of the leaders of the shinobi clans, the head doctor of the hospital, the head teacher of the academy, Seo, who is the commander of Moon, the head merchant of the village, and the leader of Moon's Oinen division. Every 4 months, all of the council members were checked on by the Moon Commander, the Oinen Commander, the head Jounin, and the person who trains new Moon recruits. Usually, the village head tactician would also be on the list, but Seo is both the village head tactician and the Moon Commander. The routine check is done to stop corruption in the village from taking hold. Seo doesn't think it's going to happen, but you never know. Seo sighed and walked to the kitchen to make herself a cup of hot tea to warm up. She took a sip of the lavender-scented tea and walked to the kitchen window to look out at the garden and admire the full moon. As she did this, the fresh scent of the lavender tea reached her nose. Every night in Moon Country, there is a full moon in the sky, which is how they got their name. The only night when there is no moon is when their village can be seen and found. Seo sighed when she thought about Sena, who was in a coma in the hospital after the village was finished. No one knew when she would wake up, and Madara already had the best doctors from the village working on her. Seo liked that. Unlike Konoha, people in Tsukigakure don't treat bloodline wielders like gods and don't treat people who are different badly. Everyone in the village knew that they were immortal, but no one cared because Madara and Seo had given them a second chance at life. Seo almost jumped and dropped her teacup when she felt 2 arms wrap around her waist from behind. She then turned, and when she saw that it was Madara, she was able to calm down. Had she been thinking that much for that long? Seo smiled and put her cup down on the kitchen counter next to where she was standing, but she didn't move out of Madara's arms. "Today, you're late," Madara said. "I'm sorry." He said this with a small smile at the end of his lips. "We have information about the war between Konoha, Iwa, Suna, and Kumo. I met with the council all day today." Unlike most cages, Madara don't wear the cage robes. Instead, he wore the usual Jounin uniform, only with a black cape with silver flame patterns adorning the ends of it, with the kanji words for Tsukikage written on the back. Seo had made the cape for Madara as a gift when the village first started up, and the man loved it so much that he was never seen without it. Seo had put a seal on the cape so that it would never wear out and the color would never fade, no matter how much he used it. Seo muttered, "I met some leaf nins today," and Madara wrapped his arms around her as she rested her head on his chest. "It sure makes me think of bad times. I hate this," Madara said. "Me too," in her ear as she licked her earlobe. "But we still have to wait until we can come out in the open." "We still have to wait," Seo whispered. "Yeah," as she kept her forehead on Madara's chest. Madara then tilted her chin up so she was looking straight into his eyes. Seo's eyes got a little wider when Madara pressed his lips against hers and pushed her backwards so her back hit the wall, wrapping one strong arm around her waist and the other in her hair. Seo gasped when Madara stuck his tongue in her mouth and began kissing her passionately and forcefully. He used his tongue to explore the inside of her mouth, pulling her head back slightly so he could get to her throat. "My apologies," Madara whispered against her lips as his kisses increased in intensity, attacking her throat next, sucking on the tender skin. "I need to get rid of some stress. Things have been so busy lately." When Seo heard the word stress release, she might have sighed. Ninjas have a pretty stressful life, and most of them need ways to calm down. Sex is one of the most common ways to deal with stress. There was a lot of sex. That's probably why most kunoichis have kids so young these days. During the Shinobi clan wars, the youngest kunoichi to ever get pregnant was 18. Seo whispered to Madara, "Well, aren't you impatient today?" as she wrapped her arms around his neck and moved up his body. "You know you want it too," Madara said with a smirk in her throat as she reached down with one hand and pulled on Seo's kimono's belt. They both then pulled apart before staring at each other for several moments before Madara led Seo to their bedroom, and the door closed shut behind them. Senju Forest, Country of Fire, Itai. Sakura almost groaned, holding onto her head that made her feel like her head is about to be split open. "Was the seal effective?" "Looks like it," Neji said with a small groan as he looked around. He then frowned to himself. "Strange. If I'm not mistaken, this is the forest around Konoha, but it seems a little different." "Heads up, guys," said Shikamaru suddenly. He then gave a sigh. "Someone is coming to visit us soon." "Huh?" The next moment, both Sakura and Neji soon saw what he had meant when nearly 3 full squads of a NBU surrounded them, all with ferocious-looking weapons in their hands. Shikamaru sighed. "Difficult," he whined. "Fine, we get it," he said, raising both hands to show the ANBUs that they didn't have any weapons. Sakura and Neji did the same. We'll go with you without a fight. It didn't seem to take long for the ANBU squads to bring the three into the village, where everyone watched with interest. Shikamaru, who is the most observant of the three, took in everything he could see, including the heads on the Hokage monument. He could have groaned when he saw only 3 heads instead of the usual 5, realizing what was going on. Shikamaru said in a whisper to Sakura and Neji, "I know where we are now. I kind of messed up the seal, I think. We're 20 years in the past. Department of Interrogation and Torture. Konohagakure no Sato. Strange visitors." Senju Tobirama frowned as the current head of the T&I department escorted him through the hallways. "Couldn't you have done it on your own? When I made Hijin the Hokage, I gave him the full responsibility." That is true, in a way. After Hashirama's demise at Madara's hands, Tobirama had become the Nidaime Hokage, and the first thing that he did as Hokage is to declare that anyone else who even tried laying a hand on any Uchiha will be thrown into jail for at least 10 years. Hashirama liked to handle things with soft methods, but Tobirama is more into hard methods. This is one reason why 2 of Seo's students, Shimura Danzo and Orochimaru, have so much respect for him. Another is that Seo once told them that if anything ever happens to either of them, they can trust Tobirama. Seo and Madara's nephew, Uchiha Haruki, had also said the same thing. Then, during the Second Great Ninja War, which happened about a decade ago, give or take a few years, Tobirama went on a mission with Sarutobi Hijin, Shimura Danzo, on a Kimichi, and another ninja whose name he didn't know. Complications came up, and Tobirama would have died when he decided to act as bait if Seo hadn't taught him a few seals that he used to save his life on that fateful day. He had then handed over the mantle of Hokage to Hijin whilst he became an advisor of sorts to his old student. Yamanaka Teru, the current head of the Yamanaka clan and also the head of a NBUT&I, said, "I'm sorry, Tobirama-sama, but our guards detected a disturbance in the Senju forest, and they found those 3 there who came without so much as a fight. I would have asked Hokage-sama to come, but he's currently in a meeting with the War Council. Thus, I have to call you in instead." Tobirama sighed. "Fine, I understand the situation," he said in a low voice. "I'll handle this. Be on your way." "Yes, sir," said Yamanaka Teru as they stopped in front of a metallic door with the plaque Interrogation Room 4 written on it. He said, "I'll leave you to it," bowed, and then walked away. Senju Tobirama sighed and was about to open the door when he heard an angry voice on the other side of it. "What do you mean when you say, you broke the seal, so we can't go back?" Shikamaru asked a loud, angry woman. Tobirama's eyebrow went up in surprise. "Shikamaru," he was thinking. "Exactly what it sounds like," Sakura grumbled a male voice. "And I did say that I'm not sure if the seal will work, right? And it's not a total failure, because we did go back, right? Yes, 20 years ago, in the middle of the Third Great Shinobi War," Sakura said in a loud voice, and Tobirama raised an eyebrow. He knew that seals can do almost anything, even traveling back in time, as Seo had told him once, only that those seals are classified under forbidden, as it carries a high risk level to the user. "Didn't you say that you'll send us back 6 years? But more importantly, how do we get ourselves out of the mess that we are in?" Another male voice asked. "And why is Seo even here to begin with?" Seo, Tobirama thought. He then chose to walk in at this time, and the 3 people in the room turned around as soon as they saw him. Because they have surrendered peacefully. The ANBU have merely stripped them of their weapons and left them in this room without tying them up. Even in Konoha, there are rules about how prisoners should behave. "Good evening," said Tobirama with a smile on his face, closing the door behind him. "And Nidaime-sama," the pink-haired girl uttered weakly, and Tobirama raised an eyebrow. "I'd like to know who you 3 are, but I've already heard some of your conversation," he said. "Is the Seo you've talked about Uchiha Seo?" All 3 people's eyes lit up. "Do you know her?" asked the girl excitedly. Tobirama raised an eyebrow. "I'll ask the questions here," he said briskly. "First of all, tell me who you are and how you got here. I heard earlier that you can travel through time. Is that true?" The 3 teens shifted on their feet uneasily, and Tobirama sighed. "Your names?" he asked. "Haruno Sakura," Sakura muttered. "Nara Shikamaru, Hyuga Neji." "As you probably already knew, I'm Senju Tobirama," said Tobirama. "You can just call me Tobirama or something. I don't like formalities all that much, and I'm no longer the Hokage anyway." The 3 teens nodded. "I've heard about time travel seals from a friend of mine," he explained. "She's a seal mistress, and she was the first one in the shinobi world. She told me once that time travel seals were one of her more focused seal studies back then, and that when you travel through time, you have to give up something in exchange. Most of the time, it's your own identity of who you were in your original timeline." Shikamaru nodded. Seo said the same thing once, he mumbled, and Tobirama frowned. Yeah, I've heard you say that name before, he said, and all three teens looked up. There is only one Seo that I knew of. I'm not sure if it is the same person you are talking about, but is this her? Sakura asked, pulling a half-crumpled photo out of her pocket and showing it to Tobirama, who looked at it with a raised eyebrow. The photograph was slightly crumpled, and there were 7 people in that photo that seems to be taken outside the Hokage Tower. 3 were of the 3 teens currently in front of him. One of them seems to be his grandniece, who is currently in the hospital taking care of her fiancé. This is because a medic nin put Namikaze Dan's body in a special sealing scroll and sent it back to Konoha so that medic nin could do their magic. That had been another contribution by Seo, and why Tobirama had insisted that the academy learn about her despite her later status as one of Konoha's first traitors. He can't possibly tell the public why Madara and Seo left Konoha, for reasons that are obvious. Uchiha Haruki, Seo and Madara's nephew, had actually cornered him a week after their departure, and he had no choice but to tell him everything that he knew, and boy, that was the first time he'd ever seen Haruki Uchiha so angry. The Uchiha clan head had then proved to be just as ruthless and hardened as his uncle, maybe even more, that not even the Hyuga clan dared to piss the young clan head off. Tobirama thinks that Danzo and Orochimaru might have known why their teacher left, because he heard from Tsunade that the two nearly broke down the doors of the Uchiha clan compound after Seo left, sending nearly 10 Uchihas to the hospital before Uchiha Haruki stopped his clansmen and let the two into his house. After that, both of them seemed to have a big grudge against Konoha, especially Danzo, and even Orochimaru seemed to be silently angry at almost everything. After that, they only talked to Haruki, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and a few others, including him. No one can deny that the two were great strategists, especially Orochimaru, who was only 5 at the time. They had both learned what they could from their teacher, the legendary tactician who had brought Konoha victory after victory in the wars. The silver-haired man in the photo seems almost like a grown-up version of Hadake Sakumo's 7-year-old son, Hadake Kakashi. The last man in the picture was wearing a faceplate and had dark brown hair. He was probably about the same age as Kakashi. And the last person in the picture was someone whose face Tobirama remembered, and he almost couldn't breathe. Seo, I see, said Tobirama as he handed the photo back to Sakura. She also goes back in time. Neji looked at his friends and said, "We came to find her. Back home, some things happened, and we wanted to hear what Seo had to say and also find her. She's our friend, after all, and the only one who gave us hope, so that's why." "How do you know Seo, Tobirama-sama?" asked Sakura curiously. Tobirama sighed. He said, "She is one of my best friends. We fought together during the time of the Shinobi clan wars, and she is also one of the founders of the village. Apparently, she has a case of amnesia as well. But some things happened about 30 years back, and she left, alongside Madara-san, her husband." All 3 teens blinked. "Husband? Yeah," Tobirama said with a sigh and a pinch of his nose bridge. "I would normally not tell anyone things like that, but since you are her friends, I see no harm in telling you. But this information does not leave this room." All 3 teens nodded. The reason why Madara-san and Seo left 30 years ago was because Tobirama struggled with his words. My brother violated Seo. All 3 teens' eyes grew wide with fear and shock. Tobirama sighed. "If you really want to know more about Seo, then I'll suggest that you talk to Shimura Danzo, the head of the ANBU Roots, an organization that both Seo and Madara-san had founded, alongside the normal ANBU core. He is her student, after all. I would have asked you to talk to Uchiha Haruki, their nephew, but he's dead. He died in the Second Great Ninja War. You can talk to Haru's son Kunz to see if he knows anything though. I'll arrange with Hijun to have you 3 enlisted as Konoha ninjas, but we need different names for Neji-kun and Shikamaru-kun, for obvious reasons." Sakura-san is alright, as I hadn't heard of a Haruno clan in Konoha. Sakura nodded. Her family only moved to Konoha after the Kyuubi attack, and even then, they were just a clan of merchants, which means they were just regular people. She is the first ninja in their family, and that is why her parents have been so hesitant in the beginning to allow her to be a ninja, especially after Pain's attack had almost decimated the entire village. "Shikamaru, I'll change your hair," said Sakura, standing up, and Tobirama handed her a kunai silently. "You still look too much like a Nara, so no one will believe you if you say you're not one." Shikamaru grumbled and then took his hair out of the ponytail he was wearing. "If you make me look like an idiot, I'll shave you bald, Sakura," he said as Sakura started cutting his hair, and brown locks fell to the ground. "Don't worry," said Sakura cheerfully as she began to work on his hair. After 10 minutes, she was done and Sakura took a step back to look at her work. That's it. We're done. Neji gave Shikamaru a low whistle of approval as he looked at him. Damn, Sakura, if you ever decide to stop being a ninja, you could be a hairdresser, he said. Shikamaru's hair was styled like a mohawk by Sakura, which is kind of a good look for him. Sorry, I like being a medic nin, Sakura said with a smile as she gave Tobirama the kunai back. Names. Tobirama coughed in amusement, watching Shikamaru finger his hair with some displeasure on his face. Neji took a moment to think before he replied. Hibiki Neji, he said. Taiga Shikamaru. Shikamaru grunted. It was the name I used when I did an infiltration mission in the past, he said in answer to a question that hadn't been asked. Hainsawa Sakura. Sakura answered. It won't complicate matters afterwards once my clan comes to Konoha, she explained. Very well, said Tobirama with a nod. I'll get some of the Jounins to test your skill level later. As for Neji-kun, take this. He held out a black blindfold that he'd taken from his pocket, and Neji blinked. Your eyes are obviously of the Byakugan, so you need to find a way to hide them. This blindfold has a seal on it that lets the wearer still see. Seo gave it to me a long time ago when I hurt my eyes on a mission and couldn't let light in for a while. Neji nodded before putting the blindfold over his eyes. Then he realized that Tobirama was telling the truth. It was like he never had a blindfold around his eyes at all. Well, then, you three, welcome to Konoha, the 7th training ground. Konohagakure no Sato. Shimura Danzo didn't say anything as he put a bouquet of white lilies in front of the memorial stone and looked for the name Uchiha Haruki on it. He then let out a sigh and looked up at the sky. Where are you, teacher? He thought. Shimura-senpai. A voice made him turn around, and when he did, he saw Orochimaru coming toward him. He was dressed in all white, like the Hyugas always are, and had a serious look on his face. He was holding a bouquet of white lilies. Danzo sighed. You're back, Orochimaru, was more of a statement than a question. After Seo's departure, it had been Uchiha Haruki who had taken Seo's place to watch over the both of them, along with Jiraiya, acting like a sort of mentor to the three of them, as Haru had then been older by Danzo by at least 7 years. And after his passing, Danzo had then taken his place to watch over the 2 younger ninjas, as he could also be considered their sibling disciple. Orochimaru managed a small smile. Hi, he said as he laid down the bouquet of lilies at the memorial stone and said a small prayer beneath his breath. Seems like Jiraiya has been here before either of us, he noted, spying the sake cup lying at the foot of the memorial stone. Haru-san, I've taken on an apprentice today. Her name is Mitarashi Anko, and she was the worst student in her class at the academy, but I see something in her. The teachers tried to get me to take on some of the better students because I was one of the Sannin, but I refused. He smiled. After all, it's a lot more fun to teach a fool than a supposed genius, right? That's what Seo-sensei taught us. Danzo smiled before looking up into the skies, staring at the stars. He thought about how much his teacher liked to look at the stars. Where are you, teacher? Compound of the Uchiha clan. Konohagakure no Sato. Uchiha Hisao, the current head of the Uchiha clan and Uchiha Haruki's son, gave the leather-bound book to Sakura and said, "This is my father's diary. It might help you. When I was younger, my father always used to talk about his aunt and uncle a lot, and that they were his surrogate parents, as his own parents have passed away when he was a mere toddler. They both helped raise him, and he loves them like his own parents." He then smiled. I remember them both a little, as I was very young when they have both disappeared. What do you know about them? Asked Neji. I'm afraid only as much as everyone else in the village, Hisao said. But unlike in the village, they are very loved and respected in the Uchiha clan. Seo-sama is a legendary kunoichi whose fame even precedes that of the Shodaime and Nidaime Hokages. She is the first seal mistress in the shinobi world and has helped advance seal studies to what they are today. She is really that great, Sakura muttered. Yeah, said Hisao with a nod. That's why the Uchiha clan had such great respect for her and Madara-sama. But unfortunately, he sighed, we can't say the same about the village. I can't even count how many times my clansmen had fought with other ninjas, especially those from the Hyuga. He almost spat out the name. Just because those shits for brains have the gall to insult them. They didn't even stop to think that Konoha won't be at where they are today if it wasn't because for Seo-sama and Madara-sama. Sakura, Neji, and Shikamaru exchanged looks. I believe that Seo is still alive, said Sakura an hour later as they walked through Konoha's streets, all three sensing an ANBU squad trailing them from the rooftops, and thus were careful to not raise their voices. Yeah, I think so too, said Shikamaru with a nod. Do you remember what Seo had said once about Uchiha Madara? That he is an immortal because of his eternal Mangekyou. If that is so, then I believe that Seo probably had the same thing too. Neji nodded. I think so too. Hey, a voice said, and the three of them turned to see a brunette woman of about 18 years old coming toward them in the standard Jounin outfit. 3 young men followed her. Are you the ninjas that Tobirama-sama had mentioned? All 3 nodded dumbly. She then gave a smile. Good, we're supposed to test your rank. Follow me. My name is Sasaki. Sasaki Yoshino. Nice to meet you. Damn, you guys are strong, said Yamanaka Inoichi an hour later as he nursed his bruised cheek in Ikaraku ramen. His male teammates were also nursing some kind of injury. Tobirama-sama wasn't joking when he said you guys are strong. Remind me not to underestimate a blind person, too. Neji laughed when he heard that. Oh, don't be such a baby, Inoichi. Yoshino scolded as she pulled on Shikaku's bandages a little tighter than necessary, causing him some unnecessary pain. Oh, sorry, Shikaku, she said, and then, with a light clap, she shut the first aid box next to her. She joked, Ritsu will dump you if she finds out what a wimp you are. Inoichi blushed. Oh, come on. Everyone knew that she has the hots for you, and vice versa. Akamichi Chusa laughed. But you're sure strong though, said Yoshino, turning towards Shikamaru. Your name isn't just for show. You really seem to have a natural affinity with shadows, unlike the Nara clan. Thanks, Shikamaru said with some hesitation. Was she trying to flirt with him? Hey, Shikamaru looked up. Yoshino was staring at him with stars for eyes, and he almost cringed. Are you free this Saturday? Shikamaru almost groaned. This just has to be someone's idea of a joke. Behind Shikamaru, Sakura and Neji were both trying to stifle their laughter and failing miserably. Nara Shikaku, Shikamaru's would-be father, was glaring daggers at him, trying to drive a hole through his head with sheer willpower alone. Shikamaru sighed, eyeing his mother who had stars for eyes. Talk about troublesome. How could it have turned out that his mother fell in love with him? 2 years after, Kano Hagakure no Sado. 2 years after the start of the Third Great Shinobi War, the war got worse for the village of Konoha. Namikaze Minato, one of the best jounin in the Leaf Village, had no choice but to study his sensei's sealing notes, which he had gotten from his sensei, the first seals mistress in the shinobi world. And it helps that there are short notes in there about how her most famous jutsus, Haraishin and Harinki, worked. These were speed jutsus that let her appear here and there in the blink of an eye. To this day, no shinobi knows how she made them. And Namikaze Minato is, if nothing else, a smart man. From the smallest details written there, he was able to make an imitation of those moves. When Jiraiya saw it, he said it wasn't even half as fast as his sensei's, but Minato's version is good enough to deal with the Iwanins. Shikamaru, Sakura, and Neji were all put in the front lines of battle, though Sakura helped Tsunade with the injured Mor, which the blonde woman is thankful for. Senju Tobirama, who is probably the oldest shinobi on the entire continent at the time, was helping Nara Shikaku plan the war, while Shikamaru led the troops on the front lines. Both Tsunade and Sakura got along well because they were similar in personality, and Sakura was glad to see a much happier version of her teacher because both her brother and fiancé, who is now her husband, were still alive. During one of the few breaks the two head medics of Konoha's shinobi forces had during the war, Tsunade told Sakura that one of the sealing methods that the famous seals mistress Uchiha Seo had left behind had taught shinobis how to seal a severely injured person into a scroll, and put them in stasis so that doctors would have all the time in the world to prepare for surgery and treatment and save their lives. This method is what saved both of Tsunade's loved ones, and she is grateful to the famous seals mistress. Like Tobirama, she has tried to show her gratitude by helping the Uchiha clan in any way she can. The Camp Northlake, Fusagakure no Sato. Fusagakure no Sato was originally one of Iwa's allies in the war, but after one of Konoha's major campaigns, which Orochimaru of the Sannin led, Kyusa fell into Konoha's hands, which made the war slightly more in their favor. And that's where Shikamaru and Sakura were now, walking with Tsunade towards the makeshift jail cell, which was just a tree or something with the prisoners chained and shackled to it with their backs against it and chakra shackles on their hands and feet. What? Prisoners? Sakura repeated with a furrowed brow. Since when do they bring prisoners in alive? Shikamaru was also confused, judging by the look on his face. Well, they weren't wearing any hitaites to identify the village they're from, and no matter how much the interrogators questioned them, they refused to say what village they're from. But they're thought to be enemy spies, Tsunade said. Can you both give it a shot? Shikamaru muttered, okay, I guess, and he looked at Sakura, who shrugged. The jail cell was actually close to the center of the camp, so that if the prisoners ever tried to escape, there would be many eyes on them. Not that they can do it, because chakra shacklers are tied around their hands and feet, cutting off their access to their chakra. Jiraiya of the Sannin and Namikaze Minato were both standing in front of the tree jail cell and questioning the prisoners, though it was more like a shouting match. Sakura, Tsunade, and Shikamaru could hear this shouting match all the way from where the medical tents were at the other end of the camp. The other Leaf Nins, who were all resting after a large-scale operation earlier that afternoon, were all watching with great amusement, as was Minato, whose teacher is the one doing the interrogating. For the last time, we're not from Iwa, Suna, Kumo, or any other village you're thinking of, you fucking lecher, shouted the nin tied up in the middle to Jiraiya. The three captured nin all looked to be around 15 years old, but Sakura could tell that their chakra stores were easily at low to mid-jounin level. Then what village are you from then? Jiraiya asked in frustration. Even the famous spy master can't tell what village they're from. Their mannerisms and clothes don't seem to be from Iwa, where most of the ninja wore as little as possible. They don't look like they are from Kumo, and they also don't look like they are from Suna. The three young ninjas wore a style that looks like a t-shirt under a short-sleeved combat jacket or a sleeveless vest left open. They wore cargo pants for the boys and shorts for the kunoichi. The kunoichi wore fishnet stockings on her legs, and all three wore the standard black ninja sandals. None of them wore a Hidaite, which means they are either spies from an enemy country or scouts from an unknown village. The last possibility is that they are ninjas who don't belong to any village. Like hell, I will tell you. The kunoichi in the group finally lost her cool, and glared daggers and knives at Jiraiya. Jiraiya and Minato sighed before turning back to Shikamaru, Tsunade, and Sakura. It's no good, Tsunade, said Jiraiya with a sigh. They're not talking at all. This is getting us nowhere. Tsunade scowled. Where's Orochimaru or even Inoichi? She asked. When she said those names, the three ninja tied to the tree narrowed their eyes, but Sakura and Shikamaru saw those looks. Maybe they can do something. Maybe Inoichi can do a mind walk or something. Minato immediately shook his head, showing that he disagreed with Tsunade. It is too dangerous, he said. Some ninjas have a fail-safe built into their minds so that if someone tries to get in, it will backfire on them. Jiraiya frowned. So then what? What happened? Minato asked, turning around and staring at the Leaf camp as the two squads of sentries fell to the ground and stopped moving. An enemy attack. He got ready to use a Hiraishin kunai. Where? Shikamaru narrowed his eyes and scanned the camp's chaos with them. There. Everyone in the camp stared with wide eyes as a person in a black cloak covered from head to toe appeared in a flash of silver light. And Jiraiya narrowed his eyes. He knows this jutsu. Who are you? Sakura asked. A couple of Leaf Nins ran at the unknown attacker, who just stepped to the side and held out a hand with silver bracelets that glowed silver. The telltale signs of a seal appeared on the backs of those Leaf Nins, and they fell to the ground and stopped moving. Shikamaru's eyes widened just a little bit. He knows what that means. A seal's user. Wow, he thought in shock, exchanging looks with Sakura before turning his attention back to the unknown attacker. And with that level of skill, a seal master. This is not good. One of the Jounin made several hand seals for a jutsu, then inhaled and exhaled. Katen, Gakakyu no Jutsu. One of the three tied-up ninjas struggled with his chains and yelled, Seo-sama. In fear and horror, Sakura's eyes opened up. Seo, the fire jutsu then seemed to be sucked up by a vortex of some kind. The Leaf Nin then saw that the cloak had been burned and thrown to the ground, revealing a redhead kunoichi with sky-blue eyes who didn't look to be older than 18 or 19. She was wearing what looked like a midnight blue battle kimono over a black fishnet shirt and black pants that reached to her thighs. On her back, a gold medallion held a gray cloth holster together, which had a sword hanging from it. Shikamaru knew right away that the silver bracelets on her wrists were sealing bracelets because they were silver. She also had a Hidaite tied around her neck. But because shadows are falling on her, no one can see the symbol on the Hidaite. No one at the camp recognized her. Not anyone, but only three people. Shikamaru, Sakura, and Jiraiya. Shikamaru and Sakura took deep breaths and quickly looked at each other before turning back to Seo with their eyes wide open. Jiraiya heard this quick conversation and realized that they knew who Seo was. He narrowed his eyes. He made a mental note to talk to them both later. Sensei, Jiraiya thought, his eyes wide and staring at Seo. You're still alive. Going what's on here? She doesn't look a day over 18. Just like how she looked nearly 60 years ago. Who the hell are you? One Leaf Nin demanded. Seo didn't say anything before she took a step forward. The next second, she stopped in her tracks as the figure of Namikaze Minato appeared behind her with a kunai at her throat. Seo turned her head just a little bit to catch a glimpse of Minato out of the corner of her eye. Not too bad, she said simply. So you must be the yellow flash of Konoha. Your reputation goes before you. Stop talking nonsense, said Namikaze Minato, whose normally warm blue eyes had turned cold and hard. Who are you, and what are you doing here? If I don't like your answer, I'll kill you right here. Sayo closed her eyes and smiled before opening them again. Don't make me laugh, she said plainly. You can't kill me. You're so stupid that it's almost funny. But Minato's eyes widened in horror and shock, as did everyone else's, when one moment the girl is being held hostage by Minato, and the next, she is standing behind Konoha's best enemy repellent, a kunai held to his neck. Not good enough, she said, holding the kunai closer to Minato's jugular vein. The blonde gulped. Minato, Uzumaki Kushina yelled to him with horror written all over her face. She was standing next to a silver-haired child who Sayo recognized as Hadake Kakashi, a student of the Yellow Flash, and the son of the White Fang. At age 6, he was also the youngest person in Konoha to ever reach the rank of Chunin. Let him go, Minato gulped, not daring to move because if he made one wrong move, the girl could easily cut his neck open. When did she? Sayo asked with a raised eyebrow. Do you think I didn't notice the kunai on the ground when those leaf nins rushed me just now? But I must say, that move of yours isn't bad for a copy of the famous Hiraishin. I know everything about that move, including how to defend against it and where the blind spots are. The true Haraimki and Hiraishin, once done, won't even let anyone see the user coming until it's too late. That's the point of the Haraimki and Hiraishin. Why are you here? Minato hissed. Sayo before taking one step back from Minato, and the blonde narrowed his eyes as he turned around. I'm not here to start a fight, she said simply. But trust me, I would love nothing more than to wipe your village off the map. All of the leaf nin narrowed their eyes and prepared their kunais and weapons. Put down your weapons. I'm not here to fight. I'm just here to get those 3 guys over there. She pointed to the tree where the 3 tied-up nins were chained to the tree. Sayo then made a single ram seal. Then there was a loud crack, and when Jiraiya and Tsunade turned around, their eyes widened when they saw the chakra shackles on the wrists and feet of those 3 nins crack, break, and fall apart on the ground. The chains holding them to the tree also broke. What the hell? Kushina asked, her eyes wide. Sayo-sama, the kunoichi of the 3 stood up with her 2 allies, rubbing her wrists. Sayo simply turned toward them and said, I'll hear your story later in the village. For now, though, she put out a hand, and a black portal opened right next to the 3 people. Get through that and go back to the village. Go straight to the hospital to get checked out before you give your reports. Hi. The 1 kunoichi and the 2 shinobi then walked through the portal before it closed behind them. Sayo then turned and looked at the leaf nins with a cold look. Before you idiots try to capture foreign ninjas, find out which village they belong to, she said, pointing with one thumb to her Hirai-8, where the symbol of a crescent moon was visible to everyone as the clouds covering the moon in the sky moved away. Minato and the other leaf nins looked a lot weaker after that. Tsuki nin, Minato almost whispered. Sayo said, Tsuki doesn't want to get involved in this stupid war, and we don't want it either. But we will get back at you if you touch our ninjas. If you hold one of our ninjas hostage again or do something similar, don't blame me for being cruel. Sayo then looked over the group of Sannin, briefly focusing on Shikamaru and Sekura before looking away. The black portal then opened up under her feet, and she was gone. Sekura's eyes were wide, as was Shikamaru. She isn't a genius like Shikamaru, but from the short time they spent together, she knew that Sayo didn't recognize her. It was almost like Sayo was seeing her for the first time. What's going on here? Tsukigakure no Sato, Tsuki no Kuni. Sayo made an unfamiliar hand sign, and as she did, a bright pillar of light shone down onto the ground. Sayo then went into the pillar of light. In less than 3 seconds, she was standing at the arrival port of the village, where everyone goes when they enter the village. Even with her ability to travel through portals, she can't get past the seal that was put on the village. It was actually Madara's idea to have this way of letting people into the village so that they can keep track of who has come and gone. Only people whose chakra signatures were keyed into the guard system of the village would be able to get in. Most of the time, people in Tsuki no Kuni went to one of the shinobi outposts to ask the village for a mission. Those shinobi outposts were there to keep the country safe and to let civilians send mission requests to the village. Tsukigakure no Sato is probably the village with the highest level of security out of all 6 elemental countries. Sayo had heard the idea of security from Madara. She just put it into action, but they both had to put in some work to make the village. Sayo-sama, one of the 2 ninjas on guard duty that night, bowed to her as she came through the pillar of light. Welcome back. Shin and the others are at the hospital. Once the doctors give them the okay, they'll give Madara-sama their reports. Sayo nodded because she didn't trust herself to speak. Seeing so many leaf nins brought back bad memories, and the fact that that blonde leaf nin had been so close to her and had even touched her skin earlier. It brought up some bad memories that she would rather keep buried. Sayo-sama, the kunoichi on sentry duty, asked with worry when he saw Sayo's pale face. At every outpost of the village, including the entry point, there were always 2 ninja on sentry duty, a kunoichi and a shinobi, with one of them being a medic nin. "Are you alright?" "I am fine, Ayako," said Sayo with a weak smile. "If you see Madara, tell him I'm going home." "All right," said Ayako with a nod, giving her teammate a worried look. "Do you want me to fetch Madara-sama?" "Don't bother," said Sayo. "Good work as always," she said, and then she ran away before either of them could stop her. She went straight to the Uchiha mansion and walked in, shutting the door behind her and keeping it shut with her weight. She calls it a mansion, but it's really just a modest-looking 2-story house with a beautiful garden and a backyard with a koi pond and beautiful sakura trees. The back is surrounded by a high wall. It's a simple house, but Madara and Sayo liked it even more than the Uchiha district back in Konoha. Sayo loved to sit in the weeping sakura tree in the Uchiha clan enclave during the Shinobi clan wars, so Madara also planted a weeping sakura tree in the backyard for her. It was taller than the other trees in the backyard. Sayo was breathing heavily, and she had one hand clenched in the fabric of her kimono. The short time she spent with those leaf nins brought back some bad memories, especially when that blonde man had gotten behind her like that. Memories of the night several years ago when Hashirama had violated her. "Do you think he'll want you now that you're hurt and touched by another man?" Sayo closed her eyes tightly to try to block out those images. Then she snapped her eyes open again and went straight up the stairs to the master bedroom and straight into the bathroom. She then turned on the lights in the bathroom, shut the door behind her, and jumped right into the bathtub that Madara had built as a joke when they were building their house, and the rest of the village, saying that they could take a bath together because it was almost as big as a small swimming pool. Sayo then turned on the shower head and let the strong stream of water hit her. She didn't care that she was still fully clothed, and she slowly got soaked. She turned the water as hot as she could handle and got down on her knees in the tub, staring at her reflection in the water puddles. She closed her eyes to try to block out her memories of that night, wrapping her arms around her middle as she did so. Sayo screamed, "Let me go," as she struggled against her chains, but Hashirama slammed her back onto the bed with an insane look in his eyes and a wicked grin on his face as he hovered above her, half naked. "Hashirama, please, just let me go." "Now, why would I do that?" Hashirama smirked cruelly as he bent over Sayo and licked her neck. His hands moved down to the fishnet shirt she was wearing after he had ripped off her battle kimono and thrown it on the ground earlier. Sayo felt a cold feeling settle into the pit of her stomach, and she cursed herself for taking that empty path alone when she knew Hashirama was following her after she took Orochimaru home. Sayo spat at Hashirama. "Madara was right about you from the start." Fear and panic were rising up inside her. "You're nothing but a beast. I feel bad for Midoheim that she married a failure like you. Madara is worth 100 of you." When he heard this, Hashirama's eyes got a hard look. "A failure of a man, huh?" he mused, a dark look in his eyes. "How about I show you how much of a man I can be, "Stop that. SHH, Hashirama whispered as she wiped the tears from her cheeks. "You'll thank me for this in the future." Sayo spit in his face and said, "Like hell I would. You might have my body, but you'll never have my heart, no matter what horrible things you're planning right now." Hashirama's gaze hardened. "Well, then, should we put it to the test?" he said cruelly before slamming his lips against hers, and Sayo fought him. But Hashirama is a man and much stronger and heavier than her, so he easily beat her even if he hadn't given her the drug that messed up her chakra system. Sayo wiggled under him, trying to get out of his grip. Then she felt his hand slide under her shirt and slowly move up her body, slipping into the fabric of her bra and squeezing her left breast. Hashirama broke the forced kiss and pulled his hand out of Sayo's shirt, smirking at her angry and scared face. "I'm going to make you mine, as you should have been from the start," he said. Sayo struggled with her bonds, even though she knew it was pointless. There was a sound of tearing fabric as Hashirama tore off her shirt and threw it on the ground before taking off her pants, bra, and panties. He then took off his own clothes, revealing his 10 inches member. "Hashirama, please, just let me go." Hashirama ignored Sayo's pleas and went straight to her breasts, licking and sucking her nipples before moving down her body and flicking his tongue out when he reached her sex. By the time he moved back up her body, Sayo was already crying. She hated his touches and the horrible things he was doing to her body, but she couldn't stop him. "Stop that." Hashirama then pushed deep and hard into Sayo without warning. Seo let out a loud, painful scream, and tears leaked from the sides of her eyes as she tightly shut them, not wanting to see what Hashirama was doing to her body, actually feeling that it is more than enough for her. Hashirama whispered in Seo's ear, "If you try harder, it will hurt more," and licked her earlobe as he did so. He pushed back into Seo again, grinding deeper into her as he did so, and he can't help but feel excited about this. He is here making love to the woman he has wanted as his own for years. As he looked down at the naked body beneath him, he couldn't help but smile. She's beautiful, almost as beautiful as he had always imagined her to be whenever he went to bed with his wife in name only. Seo yelled, "Fuck you," while still trying desperately to get away. "If you wanted me to fuck you so badly, you could have just told me," Hashirama said with a smirk as he started to move faster and harder, making her harder. Seo yelled, "Fuck you, you son of a BTCH," as she clenched her teeth tightly at the intrusion. After what seemed like hours, Hashirama finally got off of Seo and let go of the Mokyuten techniques that were holding her to the bed. Then he threw her torn clothes at the redhead, who tried to cover herself as best she could, tears dripping from the corners of her eyes as she stared at him with fear and terror in her eyes and one hand on her kimono. Hashirama smiled as he dressed himself slowly, taking his time. The strong smell of sperm and sex was still in the air, and he took in the smells with a light pleasure. "Do you think he'll want you now that you're broken and touched by another man?" He teased Seo, and the redhead glared back at him. "Fuck you," she huffed. Hashirama's smirk got bigger as he pulled on the outer part of his red kimono. "If you want me to fuck you so badly again, I'll gladly do it," he said, making a fake move to take off his clothes again. Seo yelled, "Don't come near me," and tried to get as far away from him as possible. "Leave. I don't want to see you." Hashirama raised an amused eyebrow. "Oh, you're mine now. How can I not see you or you me?" Seo yelled, "Get the fuck out of here." She then burst into tears again. "You jackass. How dare you do that to me? I hate you." She glared at him with tear-filled eyes. "I curse you. I hope Madara kills you in the worst way possible." Seo almost jumped when two arms wrapped around her waist from behind, even though the showerhead was still spraying water on her. Madara rested his chin on her shoulder and hugged her tightly, not caring that he was also getting wet. Madara gave her a small smile, but his eyes were filled with worry. "Ayako told me that you seemed very upset when you got back." He answered the question that had not been asked. Shin and the other two also turned in their reports about 30 minutes ago. "What's wrong?" Seo shook her head hard and shook a little bit. "It's not nothing, Seo," Madara said with worry in his voice. "What's the matter?" Seo didn't say anything, but Hashirama's words from a long time ago kept coming back to her mind. "Do you think he'll want you now that you're hurt and touched by another man?" Seo said, Madara, in a low voice, and her voice was shaking. Madara gave that a strange look and wondered what had upset his wife so much. Back when Hashirama ... well, you know. Madara's eyes got narrow as he thought about what he had found in the Senju cabin in the forest all those years ago. He was angry, but he didn't say anything. Others might think it happened nearly 40 or 50 years ago, but for him and Seo, who are immortal, it feels like it happened just yesterday. Seo pulled herself away from Madara's embrace and turned around to face him with a half-scared look in her eyes and one hand on the fabric of her kimono. "Well ... will you still want me after that, after Hashirama?" She turned away and her voice trailed off. That made Madara's eyes get bigger. Is that why Seo is so worried? But why now? Nearly 60 years had passed since then. The Uchiha head then narrowed his eyes when he remembered what Shin had told him, that the yellow flash guy had held Seo hostage for a few moments, touching her skin. Is that what made it happen? After all, the yellow flash is a leaf nin, a man, and someone from the Namikaze clan, which is related to the Senju clan but not very closely. Madara asked Seo softly, "Do you trust me?" before grabbing her lips in a passionate kiss. Seo's eyes got big when she heard that, but then she relaxed into his arms. When Madara's fingers touched the edges of her kimono, she grabbed his hand and stopped the kiss. Seo asked in a soft voice, "Could you leave for now?" "I'll be leaving in a minute." "All right," said Madara with a nod. "You'll be okay by yourself." Seo nodded. Seo came out of the bathroom after half an hour, dressed in a new set of midnight blue kimono that Madara had set out for her at the bathroom door. When the redhead went into the master bedroom, she was brushing her hair out with a comb when she saw Madara sitting on their bed and looking at a silver bracelet in his hand. When she walked in, Madara looked up and smiled. He motioned for Seo to sit next to him, which she did. He then put one arm around her shoulders and showed Seo the bracelet in his hand. Seo recognized it as the one she had made a few weeks ago to seal the door. The seals in the bracelet were made so that whoever was wearing it could just press a seal and go straight to a room in the Tsukigakure hospital. Before the bracelet can do that, the person's chakra signature must be entered into the village security system. In the hospital room, there were all kinds of seals that went straight to the bracelets. In other words, the room is like a tree, and the bracelets are like the tree's leaves. Seo made that bracelet with the war in mind, so that if one of their ninjas got caught in the middle of the fighting, it would take more than an instant kill to kill them if they could just teleport back to the village. Madara and the council both seemed very interested in this idea, but they were also worried that if the bracelet fell into the wrong hands, rival villages could easily find out where their village is and how the bracelet works. Seo had to think of a way to stop it from working, so she made it so that if the person wearing the bracelet died, the seals in the bracelet would also die. So, the person who wears it must also have their chakra keyed into the bracelet. Also, if someone in Tsuki used this bracelet for something other than life and death, they would get a harsh punishment. It was okay with the Moon Council, Madara said with a smile. We'll be making more of this starting tomorrow, so you'll have a lot of hard work to do soon. Seo smiled at him as Madara put the bracelet on the bedside table and turned to face her. Why do you think I won't want you anymore after Hashirama forced himself on you? Madara asked Seo. Seo didn't answer, so Madara sighed. Is it about the time you met the Leaf Nins? He asked. Seo's startled reaction showed that he was right. Then, Madara sighed and put both hands on her shoulders to make her look at him. Seo, do you trust me? Of course. Then, without warning, Madara slammed his lips into Seo's, kissed her passionately, pushed her onto the bed, and put his arms around her. Then, as he kept kissing her, he brought their right hands together and licked Seo's bottom lip, asking her to let him in. She did, and he then used his tongue to explore her mouth and taste her. Madara then let go of Seo's hand and began to take off his own clothes and hers. In just a few seconds, they were both naked and passionately kissing each other while running their hands over each other's bodies. Seo moaned as Madara moved slowly down her body until she reached her breasts. She licked and sucked on Seo's nipples while rough handling and fondling her breasts. As Madara moved down her body, he kissed and licked her gently as he went. When he got to her inner thighs, she lightly spread her legs apart, giving him a nice view of her lightly wet pussy. I'll never get tired of this, Madara grunted as he moved his fingers up Seo's body from her stomach to her breasts. He let his fingers run across her breasts to tease her, and she gave him a moan in return. Then Madara slowly moved toward her. Slowly at first, because no matter how many times they made love, Seo hated how painful it was when they started out too quickly. Seo? Madara asked. Seo looked at him with half-closed eyes. Her cheeks were red from passion, and her body was just starting to warm up. I'll never leave you. I'll always love you, no matter what. Seo smiled at him, then groaned as Madara pushed into her but didn't go all the way in. She moaned, yeah, Kami, this feels so. She was cut off when Madara pushed and pulled on her and she let out a groan. Madara smiled as he playfully pushed in and out of her, never going all the way in. He kept going at this speed for a few moments until he felt Seo's arms wrap around his neck and reach up to his upper back. He looked down at the body again. Seo's eyes were half open and blurry, and the passion of the moment had made her cheeks red. Seo murmured, Madara, and Madara thought her voice was almost like that of an angel. Please. Madara laughed as he felt Seo push her hips into him. This made him even more excited, so he did what she asked. Madara pushed himself hard into her without any warning. Seo let out a light scream of pain and pleasure as her nails dug into Madara's back. He then pulled away from her, only to push back into her again. The redhead moved around under him because of the pain they both felt when they made love. Seo's pain subsided until it was just a dull ache, and as he went inside her, she soon felt like she was completely full. Then Madara pulled away, and before she could say anything, he violently pushed back into her again while making a loud moaning sound. Oh Kami, Seo gritted her teeth as Madara started to move faster. She didn't like how he was getting close to her. He pulled away from her again, then hit her hard and without warning, making her scream in surprise and pleasure. He then started to move faster, and Seo moved along with him without even realizing it. She moaned because it hurt. Harder, faster. Madara gave in to Seo's request and began to push harder into her, grinding deeper into her as he went. He soon felt a tightening in his stomach, which told him he was getting close to his peak. Seo screamed again as Madara sped up. As he did, he touched a spot inside her that made her feel very dizzy and short of breath while making her want more. Seo groaned, "Oh Kami," and arched her back. Madara grinned and did her harder and faster as she said, "This feels so good." More. Madara, more. Madara did her faster and harder, which made Seo scream with pleasure when he touched that spot again. Then he groaned as her walls closed in on his member, and he almost lost control of himself. Kami, Madara groaned. Seo, you're making me suffer. Seo moaned loudly, as she felt more pressure building up inside her. Madara, almost. Madara grunted when he realized what Seo wanted and sped up. pushing into and out of her harder and deeper than before. They were both almost at their climax, but he wanted even more, so he pushed himself deeper into Seo. This made the pressure on both of them rise even more. Seo cried out, "Kami," as she grabbed Madara's shoulders. Madara grunted as the walls closed in on him. He was getting the most out of him, so he spilled his sperm into Seo at the same time they both reached their peak. "Kami," Seo muttered as she fell back on her back on the bed and put one hand over her eyes. "That was so nice." Madara gave Seo a smirk and then climbed back on top of her. He kissed her passionately on the lips and then hovered above her. "Are you happy?" he asked, and Seo laughed. "Very," she said, and Madara was glad to see that the doubt and fear that had been in her eyes before were no longer there. Madara grunted as he sucked on Seo's neck and said, "I hope I'm at least better in bed than him." Seo giggled. "Yes, for sure," she said. Madara then looked right into her eyes as he hovered above Seo, holding himself up with his hands, and he laughed at her. Ready for the next round. The answer came when someone knocked on the front door. Madara let out a low growl. Seo giggled. She said, "It looks like we'll have to keep going with this another day." Madara grunted as he got off Seo and put on a pair of black pants before getting off. He said, "I'll be right back," and then walked down the stairs. As he did, he heard the knock on the door getting louder, so he opened it with a frustrated look on his face. He asked, "What is it this time?" At the door stood a shinobi and a kunoichi. The kunoichi blushed as she looked at Madara's bare chest and looked away, while the shinobi, a jounin, coughed into his hand. He asked nicely, "Sir, please put on some clothes." "Oh, it's you," Madara said, leaning against the doorframe and crossing his arms over his chest. "What is that?" "I'm sorry to have interrupted your activity with Seo-sama, Madara-sama, but we have information from Kano," the shinobi said in a serious tone, making Madara frown. "Kano is one of the best spies in the village. He can move around in the shadows, which makes him probably even better than Jiraiya. Hanzo the salamander is on the move again, which makes the resistance movement against him risky." Madara asked with a frown, "Does that mean we have to do something?" The two ninjas in front of him nodded. "Who should I send?" He thought. Hanzo the salamander shouldn't get any more power than he already has, and Madara already had a problem with him. Almost half of the ninjas in Tsuki came from AIM as refugees, and the Uchiha leader had heard a lot about that man from them. Even Seo didn't like Hanzo, because she had heard a lot about him when she went around the elemental nations to gather information for the village. From what she had heard, she wasn't too happy about him. "Don't worry, I'll go," said a voice, and Madara jumped a little as Seo walked up next to him. She was dressed, but her hair was a mess and her eyes were tired. The two ninjas showed her respect by bowing to her. "Seo-sama, like I was saying, I'll go," said Seo, glancing at Madara. "I want to see what the only group of rebels in AIM who are strong enough to take on Hanzo the salamander can do." Madara sighed. So he said, "Then I'll come with you." The North Lake Camp. Kusagekure no Sato. Nara Shikamaru knew he should be sleeping with the rest of the Leaf Nins because they were about to start a big operation the next day. Several Leaf Nins would be sent straight to the Iwa borders to get as many Iwa Nins out as possible. Shikamaru and Sakura were among the people who took part in this operation. Shikamaru tried to sleep, but he just couldn't. This was a first for the lazy genius, who usually fell asleep at the drop of a hat. It wasn't because of the stress of war, because he had been in other wars before. Back in his original timeline, he fought in the war against the Akatsuki, which was a much scarier and more horrible war than the Third Great Shinobi War. No, what's keeping him up is the fact that one of his best friends just showed up in front of him in the middle of a Leaf Ninja camp less than 5 hours ago, and then teleported away before anyone could do anything. Even Namikaze Minato, Konoha's best jounin and best way to stop enemies, couldn't stop her. She was just there, hardly more than an arm's length away from Shikamaru, and all he could do was stare at her like an idiot. And then again, if what they think is true, Seo might have been around since the time of the Shinobi clan wars. This was a terrifying and horrible time in the elemental nations, when wars and battles were a normal part of life and anyone could die at any time. Kaiga Shikamaru sighed and briefly covered his eyes with his right hand, muttering troublesome under his breath. He then reached into the pocket of his jounin vest and took out a slightly crumpled photo, which he looked at while lying down on the hill he was on. The picture is of him, Sakura, Neji, Seo, Jiraiya, and Tsunade when they were all about 15. It was taken outside the Hokage Tower about 3 months before Jiraiya died, on the day Seo had mastered seals and was recognized as a seals master on par with Jiraiya. Shikamaru looked at the picture of Seo in silence, tracing her shape with his eyes as she smiled slightly. Just then, an upside-down face with pink hair caught his eye. It made him jump a little, and Shikamaru sat up and turned around to see Sakura with an amused Neji behind him. Sakura said, "I knew you'd be here, and she sat down on the hill next to him while Neji sat on the other side of him. Taro told me that you were gone from the tent when he went back in after his night watch, and I knew you could be found watching the stars from the highest hill in the safe zone. Shikamaru sighed. Difficult, he whined. Then he looked at Neji. When did you get here? Neji answered, about 2 hours ago. I came here with Inoichi and Shikaku. We're also going to be with the first team and will be sent out first thing in the morning tomorrow. He looked at Sakura and then back at Shikamaru. Sakura told me what happened, and the whole camp is talking about it now that I'm here, he said after a few moments of silence. Are you sure it's Sayo, both of you? Well, she looks like her alright, said Sakura, exchanging nervous looks with Shikamaru. But, she sighed, she doesn't seem to know us. I was hoping Tabarama-sama was kidding when he said she had no memory at all, but it looks like he was right. Sayo had already forgotten all about us. Shikamaru didn't say anything for a long time as he held the picture of Sayo, and didn't take his eyes off of it. Back in their original timeline, no one knew this, except maybe Ino, Neji, Sakura, and Tsunade. But he had a huge crush on Sayo for a long time. It started when they were both training to become SEALs under Jiraiya. Then, after Jiraiya died, Sayo stopped talking to everyone else, including Iruka and Tsunade. She only talked to him, Sakura, and Neji. Since Jiraiya died, he's been there for her. That's when he realized how he felt about one of his best friends from when they were in academy. Shikamaru finally looked at Sakura and Neji and said, you know, back in our original timeline, I heard some things from Sayo. He then put the picture back in his Jounin vest. She told me that Uchiha Madara went crazy and started digging deep into immortality and resurrection techniques because of his wife. The immortality and resurrection techniques that Orochimaru had were first made by Madara, then improved by the Nidaime, and then perfected by Orochimaru. Neji almost jerked when he thought about Orochimaru's Edo Tensei technique, which made Sakura frown. His wife? Asked the medic with the pink hair. Yeah, said Shikamaru with a nod. Sayo Uchiha is his wife. Sakura's eyes got bigger when she heard this. We learned about her at the academy, remember, during our first 2 years, when we mostly studied theory and history. She was only mentioned briefly, so I don't remember much about it, he said, giving Sakura a quick look. I helped Sayo when she was looking into the Uchiha clan, so I knew what she does about them. Apparently, Uchiha Sayo killed herself in the bathroom by cutting her wrists, and leaving only a note. Shikamaru looked back and forth between Neji and Sakura before taking a deep breath and reading the note from memory. My mind, body, heart, and soul belong to no one but one. The blood of injustice will be repaid tenfold to the clan of nature. No one knows what she meant or why she killed herself. It wasn't long after she died that Uchiha Madara snapped and left the village. His wife's body went missing after that, and it is said that he hid her body somewhere that only he knew the location of. That's a problem. But Sayo and I were able to piece together the story from the few clues we found. Neji frowned. This is the first time he has heard about the Uchiha clan's history from the time of the Shinobi clan wars until one of the people who started the Leaf Village betrayed them. So you're saying that Akatsuki, Pain, and Orochimaru, he said slowly, his voice trailing off. Shikamaru nodded. He said it was all part of his plan. He looked up at the night sky and said he wants to bring his wife back to life. Neji and Sakura didn't talk, they just looked at each other. Sakura was the one to say something first. Shikamaru looked at Sakura out of the corner of his eye but didn't say anything. After Sayo killed Itachi and learned where Madara lived from Itachi before he died, you and Sayo went to Madara's lair by yourselves, without anyone else with you. This was before you and Sayo, along with Neji, went after Pain and the rest of the Akatsuki and Aim. What happened then? Shikamaru's eyes darkened. Flashback. Shikamaru asked, is it here? Sayo nodded, and the two of them went deeper into the tunnel that didn't seem to end. After what seemed like hours, they finally came out into a large cave with sparkling crystals on the walls. In the middle of the cavern, against the back walls, there were white flowers that looked like they had been carefully arranged. 2 ice statues of beings that looked like angels stood on either side of the flowers, almost as if they were guardian angels. And in the middle of this flower bed was a pure white coffin with a body in it. The body was that of a woman who was probably in her late teens or early 20s. Her eyes were closed, and her hands were on her chest with her fingers intertwined. During the time of the Shinobi clan wars, when she was dressed, Konohachis often wore clothes like the ones she had on. The woman looks almost exactly like Sayo, except that she is older. In fact, she looks almost like she's just sleeping and not dead. Shikamaru frowned as he focused his eyes and saw that the woman's skin looked like it had a thin layer of ice on it, even though it was quite warm in the cave. The Nara heir then remembered what Sayo had told him when she was looking up ways to keep a body from decaying after the toads had brought Jiraiya's body out of the water in Ambikure. She was trying to find a way to keep Jiraiya's body from going bad. All ice. Yeah, it's an old story that Jiraiya told me while we were on our training trip. When he was a boy, a village in the Land of Ice was destroyed, along with the village. All of the dead people from that village ended up floating in the freezing waters of the Land of Ice. The shinobi from the Land of Ice went to get the bodies, but because the water was so cold, the bodies were all frozen solid. One of the teams, though, found a wooden coffin floating in the water. A grave. Yeah. Jiraiya said that the coffin seemed well made, like it was made by a master, because there were no nails in it at all. Not a thing. But the coffin was so airtight that it took 4 ninjas some jutsus and tools to open it. And inside, they found the body of a woman. A very pretty woman was wearing clothes that had never been seen before. People started to say at that time that the woman is probably the Rikudo Sennin's wife because the destroyed village is said to have been one of the places that the Rikudo Sennin made. People say this is why the village was attacked in the first place, because the attackers thought the Rikudo Sennin's artifacts and relics were hidden in the village. After that, what happened? The bodies that were found were taken to the village of ninjas in the Land of Ice. Not long after that, all of the bodies that were found started to melt, and the smell was almost too much to handle. But there was one body that wouldn't melt, no matter how hot it was. That was the body of the woman who was thought to be the wife of the Rikudo Sennin. The people there gave her the name All Ice, which is also spelled Alice. All Ice. Yeah. After that, there were rumors about Alice in all of the elemental nations. After about 5 years, the body was no longer there, and the rumors stopped. I'm looking into All Ice right now. Even seals don't last forever, and I need something that will last forever to keep Jiraiya's body alive. All Ice, Shikamaru muttered. Nara then saw Uchiha Madara standing in front of the flower bed, with his back to them, and staring at the coffin. Uchiha Madara. So you came, Uchiha Madara said as he turned around to face them. Sao and Shikamaru saw his face for the first time, which they had only seen in history books and on one of the statues at the Valley of the End. Sao asked, "Who is that?" as she aimed a kunai at the older person in the coffin who looked like her. Madara turned back to the coffin and smiled. Shikamaru was surprised because he had never thought that Uchiha Madara could look so human after all he had done. My love, my life, the reason for my living, and the reason for my existence. Uchiha Madara replied, though neither one of the 2 leaf nins even knew if he is talking to them, or simply talking to himself. I would do anything to see her smile again and have her with me. Yes, and that's very romantic of you, Sao said in an annoyed tone. But what does that have to do with us? I know your pattern well, Uchiha Madara. If this place is as important to you as it seems to be, you wouldn't let anyone know where you are. Why else would you tell Itachi about this place and have him tell me where you are? Sao narrowed her eyes. What are your real plans? Resurrection. Shikamaru looked angry. Risen? He asked again. That's right, Madara said as he turned back to face them. I need the sacrifice of a soul that is compatible with the person I want to bring back to life so that they can walk among us in the world of the living again, he said, turning to smile at his wife. My wife started working on the resurrection technique after my brother died during the Shinobi clan wars. It's a kenjutsu, which means it needs a lot of chakra and a living soul, but she never finished it. I tried my best to finish it, but I wasn't as good with seals as she was. Senju Tabarama, who was a friend of my wife's and had worked with her since the beginning of Konoha, finished it, but he. When Uchiha Madara turned around to face Sao and Shikamaru, he had a crazy look in his eyes. He said, "You look just like my beloved Sao, and you even have the same name. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were Sao's reincarnation." Shikamaru stepped in front of Sao to protect her from Madara's crazy eyes while holding a kunai in front of him. That's enough for me, Madara said. Out of nowhere, a sword that looked very complicated appeared in his right hand. When you die, Sao will be back by my side. Shikamaru and Sao both jumped away when Madara swung his sword at them, missing them by only a few inches. Before Sao could get her balance back, she saw Uchiha Madara standing in front of her with his sword held high. The Uchiha founder then stopped in his tracks, and as Sao followed his gaze, she saw several black shadows attaching themselves to Shikamaru and Madara's bodies and wrapping all the way around the Uchiha founder's body. Shikamaru was out of breath, and his hands were locked in the hand seal he always uses to do his shadow techniques. Just made it in time, he said in a low voice. Sao, what are you doing? Get out of the way. Naijutsu won't hold him for long. Sao just barely got out of the way when Shikamaru lost his grip on Madara and the sword fell on the spot where she had been a few seconds earlier. Shikamaru yelled, "Stop it," as he tried to use another shadow binding technique. Are you sure your wife will be happy if she finds out what you did to her just so you could bring her back as a living puppet? Madara hissed, and his eyes turned the color of the Sharingan, which is blood red. Don't you dare talk like that about my wife. Flashback is over, Sakura asked Shikamaru, with worry in her voice. Shikamaru did nothing but shake his head. He said, "It's nothing." He looked up at the stars next. "Now I see. All the signs were there and I didn't even notice." He shook his head. "And they call me a genius. But if the Uchiha Seo from our timeline died, why is the Uchiha Seo from this timeline still alive? Why does the schedule change?" The security in Aimgakure no Sato was one of the tightest in all of the elemental nations. Only Tsukigakure no Sato was tighter. Hanzo the Salamander, the leader of AIM, is known throughout all the elemental nations as a very suspicious and paranoid man. He has always had guards and bodyguards with him at all times, and anyone entering AIM would have a thorough background check done on them. Anyone who looks even a little bit suspicious was killed right away. Anyone who tried to stop Hanzo was also killed. That's how Hanzo the Salamander runs things in AIM, where he rules with an iron fist. And that's why everyone in AIM and many other places hated him so much. Hanzo also took away the children of AIM as young as 3 years old from their parents and families and trained them to fight for his cause. That's one reason why there's always civil war in AIM. But even without security, it didn't take long for two ninjas like Madara and Seo to get into AIM. This is because they have been on several infiltration missions before, back when the Shinobi clan wars were going on, and have never been caught. Kano, Tsuki's top spy master and informant, says that the group of people fighting against Hanzo has been around for a few years and that everyone in AIM knows about them, but no one knows where they are. 2 hours later, Madara grumbled, "Damn, I feel like I'm living underwater," as he pulled at the black cloak that covered him from head to toe for infiltration purposes. Because almost everyone in AIM dresses like him and Seo, no one in AIM gave them a second look. This resistance movement is really good at hiding, if you can't even find them. Seo muttered, "Well, they have to be," as she looked left and right while trying to keep the rain out of her eyes. Her cloak doesn't protect her much from the constant rain that falls in Rain Country, which is how they got their name. They must be good if they were strong enough to fight Hanzo and his army and are still around today. Madara looked left and right and asked, "But where are they?" Not even Kano knows where they are. And from what I heard around town, Hanzo had asked to meet with the leaders of the resistance movement, which gave me a bad feeling. Seo muttered, "This isn't getting us anywhere," which made Madara stop where he was. She then shut her eyes and spread out her senses, just like Sana had taught her all those years ago, to look for ninjas' chakra signatures. There aren't that many ninjas in AIM, mostly because Hanzo only lets those who are loyal to him live. Because of this, it wasn't too hard to find the chakra signatures of ninjas in AIM. Seo's eyes suddenly opened after a few seconds, and she turned to face Madara with a panicked look on her face. She told him, 5 miles west, at 3 o'clock. We should move quickly. Then she ran away, with Madara close behind her. As they ran, their cloaks flapped behind them. Seo led Madara to a place near the edge of the Rain Village. It was mostly empty and plain, except for some cliff-like areas with trees that looked like they were dead. Madara immediately used a top-level cloaking technique on himself and Seo so that they could stay hidden while they watched how things went before deciding if they should help or not. Two teens about 15 or 16 years old were standing on the plains and staring up at Hanzo and his battalion, which made up almost half of the ninja forces that were loyal to him. Seo narrowed her eyes when she saw the leaf symbol on their Hidai-8s. What the heck are leaf nins doing here? If a village didn't want to risk war, it wouldn't get involved in the politics of another village. Madara whispered to Seo, "They're Rude Anbu," and Seo's eyes grew wide, as if Madara had just read her mind. What in the hell is Danzo thinking? Seo looked at the two teens standing alone and knew from what Kano had said about them that they were the leaders of the resistance movement. One of them had bright orange hair that stuck out in every direction, and like most people in AIM, he wore a dark cloak over his clothes to cover his body. The other teenager had red hair that reached to his chin, like Seo's, but it was darker than Seo's hair, and looked almost like the color of blood. Seo then looked up at the cliff, where she saw a tall man with long blonde hair and a gas mask on his face. It was Hanzo the Salamander, who she knew right away. The man also held a girl with blue hair who looked scared. Hanzo threw a kunai, which hit the ground right in front of the two teens. "You with the red hair, use that to kill Yahiko, and I'll leave you and the woman alone." Seo can't really see the redhead's eyes, but she could tell that fear and horror were written all over his face. She could also tell that both Yahiko, the teen with orange hair, and the girl with blue hair were important to the boy. Maybe childhood friends. The girl with blue hair's face got even paler when Hanzo asked her to do something, if that was even possible, and her eyes got even bigger in shock. She yelled at the redhead, "Don't do it, Nagato. Don't mind me, you both get away." Nagato, the redhead, almost whispered, "Conan." She was shaking a little. Nagato, Yahiko said. Nagato turned to face him. Sayo could tell that the teen with orange hair was serious because he had a look in his eyes that she knew. The look of a man who is willing to die. During the Shinobi clan wars, how many times had she seen that look back? Those eyes shouldn't belong to a child that young. Kill me, Madara hissed in anger as she stood next to Sayo under the cloaking technique. Sayo almost winced as Madara tightened her grip on her arm until her blood flow was almost cut off. Yup, Madara is very angry. Sayo hadn't seen him so angry since the day they left the Leaf Village together. Madara wouldn't let Hanzo live to see tomorrow's sunrise if he somehow managed to get away from this without dying. Nagato looked at Yahiko with a face that almost looked like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Almost immediately, fear, terror, and horror took over him. Nagato, Konan screamed in terror, stop, and tried to break free of her chains, but she couldn't. Hurry up, said Hanzo, who couldn't wait. Or do you want to kill this woman? Nagato moved forward one step and then stopped dead in his tracks. Or, a person in a black cloak stepped in front of him, making him stop in his tracks. Who? Yahiko began, confused, but then he heard a loud scream from Hanzo's side. The two teens then turned their attention back to Hanzo. When they did, they saw another black-cloaked figure appear in front of Hanzo with a bloody kunai in its left hand and a hand on Konan's waist. Hanzo's right hand was also cleanly cut off. Blood was pouring from his cut wrist like a river, and his once useful hand was lying on the ground, useless, with the blood running deep into the wet ground. Hanzo hissed, "W, who the hell are you?" as he held his severed hand to his chest and blood splattered all over him. The person in the cloak didn't answer. Instead, they just grabbed a confused and bewildered Konan and pulled him into a black portal. At the same time, kunais and shurikens started raining down on the spot where they were. Just then, a black portal opened up next to Yahiko, and the unknown figure in Konan came out. Yahiko cried out in relief, "Konan," and hugged the blue-haired girl around the neck as the person in the cloak who had saved the only girl of the three freed her hands. "Who are both of you? We'll explain later," Uchiha Madara said as he grabbed Nagato and threw him at Yahiko and Konan, who just barely caught him. He gave them both a quick look. "Eyes like that shouldn't be on young people like you three." "What do you?" Nagato started, but was cut off when a dark cloak was thrown over the three of them. He then blinked and looked up at the person who had saved Konan, only to see that it was a kunoichi with red hair who didn't look much older than 18 or 19. Sayo's eyes got smaller when she saw Nagato's eyes up close for the first time. She knew right away that his eyes had a rippled pattern in them. Who is Rinnegan? She thought that it had died out and that she was the last person with that bloodline. She looked up at Hanzo and then turned around to go back to Nagato. "We'll take care of this later," Sayo told the three teens. "Stay under that and take cover," then turned her back on them and looked at Hanzo and his troops. She then shut her eyes tighter. "Let's take care of this now." "But," Yahiko said in response. Madara told the boy, "Trust us on this. If we want to kill Hanzo, we have to use our best skills. We can't worry about hitting you three by accident. Stay under there and take cover," he said, then narrowed his eyes and turned back to Hanzo. But he stayed by their side because someone had to protect the three of them. "It's going to get a little crazy around here." "Who are you?" Hanzo demanded, his face going pale from losing so much blood. Madara turned away from Hanzo and asked Sayo, "Can you handle them?" He didn't look at Hanzo, but he did ask Sayo. Sayo nodded and didn't take her eyes off of Hanzo. She put one hand on her back and her other hand on the hilt of her sword, which she reached for with her left hand. This was a partial sheath. She said, "Of course." Madara laughed and asked, "Who do you think you're talking to? Can I rely on you to keep these kids safe?" "Of course," Hanzo yelled. "I want to know who the hell you are." Sayo said, "Dead men don't hear my name. Murder them." Suddenly, a few kunais were thrown at the group of five, but Sayo just raised her right hand and they all went the other way, as if she had an invisible wall or barrier around her. One of the Aim-Nins whispered. She turned it away. Another Aim-Nin asked in surprise, "How did she do it?" Yahiko was confused and asked, "What did she just do?" That day, there are just too many surprises for him to understand. Sayo then got in a crouch and let herself fly up and toward the cliff where Hanzo and his troops were. She landed in front of Hanzo, who instinctively jumped away from her, slamming his left hand, which was the only one he could use at the moment, onto the ground. The ground started to swirl, revealing the thousands of explosive tags heading toward the redhead. Yahiko yelled in horror, "Explosive tags," as his eyes grew big from seeing so many of them. "Hanzo, you bastard. She'll die if they all go off at once," screamed Konan. Nagato added, "Get out of here." Madara crossed his arms over his chest and said, "Don't worry. It wouldn't work against Sayo as long as it had to do with seals." "Huh?" Sayo's eyes got smaller when she saw the bomb tags. "What's that?" she muttered. Good, but not good enough. She then made a strange hand seal with her left hand as the explosive tags crawled towards her. Before the shocked eyes of all the AIM-nins there, the tags stopped falling, and the seals on them turned black, which meant that the explosive seals written on them were no longer active. Madara laughed from where he was. All of the tags that the shinobi world uses now, even those that have to do with seals, were made by Sayo, he thought. Using her own work against her is like using a toy against the person who made it. It won't help her in any way. She gave them life. She can just as easily turn them off. What the heck? Hanzo said. Sayo said, I'll give you points for trying, but it doesn't work. Then she shut her eyes. I guess there's nothing I can do. Normally, I wouldn't do things like this, but you've almost made me mad. And I need to blow off some steam anyway, so you guys can be my punching bags. Her eyes snapped open again with a dangerous look, and Hanzo narrowed his eyes at the ripples in those blue-red eyes. Hanzo asked, You're not a normal kid, are you? Those eyes. One of the Rude ANBUs got his sword ready. Get her, he said, and all of the Rude ANBUs rushed into battle against their very first commander. Sayo narrowed her eyes and pulled up the sleeve of her left arm, showing the summon tattoos on it. Then she wiped some blood on it. She then hit the ground with her left hand and yelled, Try summoning. As the ANBUs jumped towards Sayo, a big cloud of white smoke came up. They were all startled when a big snout came out of the smoke cloud and knocked them all back. When the smoke cleared, the AIM-nins almost peed their pants when they saw 3 huge wolves in front of them, with Sayo kneeling on the head of the one in the middle. Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan all got scared when they saw how big those 3 wolves were. Those 3 wolves were by far the biggest wolves they had ever seen in their lives. Each was almost as tall as a mountain, and at their full heights, it looked like they could reach the moon with just their noses. Sayo was kneeling on the middle wolf, which seemed to be the biggest and most in charge of the 3. His coat is a mix of black and midnight blue, with silver streaks running through it. He had a black patch over his right eye, and you could just see a scar behind it. The scar stopped just below his forehead. A red bandana was tied around his neck. In the middle of the bandana was a silver crescent moon with a line going through it from top to bottom. The other 2 wolves have bandanas around their necks that look just like the first ones. They also look just like the first wolf, except that they don't have the scars or the eye patch. The wolf on the right has a beautiful pure silver coat, while the wolf on the left has a very dark black coat. Yahiko looked at those 3 summonings and muttered, You can't be serious. The famous night wolves. I never thought I'd see them in person. Madara said, They're always an impressive sight. The leader of the Night Wolves, Santon, looked up at his head, where the only summoner in his clan was still kneeling on one knee. You hadn't called me in a long time, and now that you do, you try summoning, calling me and my 2 brothers at the same time. Santon asked in shock. Then, his one golden eye looked over the scared ninjas in front of him, and he narrowed the one eye that was still open. And I can see that you've gotten into trouble. Again, Sayo smiled. Good to see you too, Santon, she said. She looked at the 2 wolves next to her. It's nice to see you both, Fenrir and Kurai. The black wolf, Fenrir, only muttered, but the silver wolf, Kurai, smiled at Sayo in a way that only wolves can. Santon snorted. Okay, we're done with the hellos and how are yous, he said. He then looked at the AIM-nins with his one eye. It's been a while since I went into battle, so let's hope these guys don't let me down. Fenrir looked up at the full moon in the sky and said, The moon is also beautiful tonight. He looked at his 2 brothers and said, Our power is at its highest. Is that so? Then, Santon let out a loud howl that almost knocked all the ninjas flat on their faces and almost made them deaf. He then turned his eternal glare on the ninjas in front of him, including Hanzo, who was very surprised to see one of the legendary summons right in front of him. Santon nodded and said, Let's. Kurai stayed where he was, but Fenrir and Santon ran away while Kurai stayed put. The silver wolf then opened his mouth and let out a loud howl that sent several orbs of light flying everywhere, killing at least 10 to 20 ninjas each time it hit the ground. The fiercest of the 3 wolves, Fenrir, who liked to fight the most, easily tore the terrified AIM-nins apart with his sharp teeth. Santon shouted Sayo, as he killed AIM-nin left and right, rolling his one eye up to look at his summoner. Sayo snapped, I know, as she slammed her hands together on Santon's head, used her chakra to stick herself to his head, and mumbled something under her breath. The souls of all the dead ninjas were then forced out of their bodies and into the silver sealing bracelet Sayo had always worn on her left wrist. Santon finally stopped before Hanzo. I see, said AIM-nin, who was blonde. So that's how it is. I didn't expect you to have the legendary summoning contract of the Night Wolves or the Rinnegan. But this isn't over yet. Hanzo was in the middle of making a hand seal when he stopped. As soon as the moon came out from behind the clouds, everyone could see that dark chains that didn't seem to be made of anything in this world were wrapped around Hanzo's body and limbs. The chains ended under each of the three wolves' front paws. What is it? The night wolves rule the night, Santon said with a growl. Nothing can compare to our power, except for the phoenixes who rule the day, because we are the night. As our only summoner, Sayo has some of the abilities we give to all of our summoners. What? When Hanzo felt the cold blade of a sword at his neck, he stiffened. He turned his head as far as he could to look over his shoulder, but all he saw was the redhead Kunoichi standing behind him with a sword in her left hand and the blade of that sword resting on his neck. What time did she arrive? Sayo told Hanzo, your back is open, right before she slashed through his neck with such force that his head flew off his shoulders without any blood coming out. It was finished. She did it. Ihiko spoke in wonder at last. She did it. She killed Hanzo. He is really dead, he said with a smile on his face. He is, in fact, dead. Stanton's face showed a smile. He growled, it's over. He then looked at Sayo from below. We should leave, too. With the tri-summoning, we can't stay in this world for long. Come see us again, Sayo. Sayo nodded. Thanks for helping out. Then, in a puff of white smoke, the three wolves were gone. Sayo sighed and put her sword back in its sheath. She hears a slight rustling sound, and when she turns around, she sees a barely alive Rude Anbu struggling to get up. When he sees Sayo staring at him, he stops moving. The redhead's eyes got narrow. She just said, I won't kill you. I want you to tell Shimura Danzo, ninjas from other villages don't get involved in the politics of other villages. Also, if you see him, tell him this, she said, narrowing her eyes. Tell him that Sayo-sensei is thinking of her.
I will continue this story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.